Hey guys! Today's video is going to be another disability discourse, and today we're going to be talking about dealing with the medical system. For a lot of disabled people, the medical system is a really big and complicated part of our lives, and it can be really difficult to know how to deal with it, and there's a lot of problems with it. So I wanted to have a chat about my experience and let you guys know some things I wish I'd known. I also wanted to open up this conversation, so hopefully people with more experience and different experiences can let me know and let you guys know in the comments down below how they've dealt with issues and what things are like in their country. Which brings me on to my next point, which is two things you need to know before starting this video. The first is I live in New Zealand, and my only other major experience with a medical system is in Japan. So I'm talking from experience of those two, and medical systems are unfortunately different absolutely everywhere. So please check on the things that I'm telling you before taking my word for it. And number two is, of course, there are a whole ton of really big problems with the medical system that I unfortunately cannot fix, and I can't give you a quick fix for them either. All I can tell you is how I've learned to deal with them and how I think is best to deal with them to help mitigate some of the problems that you might see or that are really common. So unfortunately I have no giant fix. I can't actually change the system. I wish that I could, but today we're just going to be talking about some things that I think will help you navigate your way through the system as it is now. So let's get into it. First, I wanted to talk about something that I think is really commonly misunderstood and not explained ever to you. So that is the roles that different people play within your medical team. I can only speak from my own experience, which is with rheumatology, and in my experience there are three main players on your side for your medical team, and it's important to understand each of their roles. And like I said, no one explains this to you. When I got diagnosed, I had no idea who to go to for different things. So this is going to be a brief explanation on each of those roles within your treatment, and after that we're going to go into a little bit of a problem and solution type of thing. So common problems that you might see or come across in the medical system, and my experience with dealing with them, and how I think you should deal with them, or you could deal with them. Okay, so first, roles of different people. So in my rheumatology team, for the most part, there are three people, like I said. That is a GP, a clinical nurse specialist, and a specialist. So I think this is fairly common for people with diagnosed chronic illnesses. So we're just going to have a talk about what each of those people is for, kind of, because for me this really helped knowing who I should go to and who not to bother with certain things. So first, your GP. Your GP is like a catch-all. If you have a cold, go to your GP. If you twist your ankle, go to your GP. If you want a referral to someone who isn't your specialist, for example, radiology, you go to your GP. Basically, when in doubt, go to your GP. They're also pretty good moral support because often they know you personally better than your specialist or clinical nurse specialist, because you might be more chatty in a GP meeting than with your specialist. So yeah, GPs are great for anything that isn't directly related to your chronic illness or disability. Next up is your clinical nurse specialist, and this is the role that I had the most difficulty understanding. I had no idea what my clinical nurse specialist was for until relatively recently, maybe 5 years ago, I kind of figured it out. So your clinical nurse specialist is basically the triage point for your specialist. Specialists tend to be super busy and don't necessarily have a lot of time to answer emails or phone calls, and they're unlikely to see you in clinic unless you're scheduled in, and that could be anywhere from a month away to a year away. So basically your clinical nurse specialist is who you go to if you feel like you need to see your specialist and your next appointment is a long time away. Usually your clinical nurse specialist will have a much better understanding of your specific medical case than your GP would, because they're trained in whatever speciality they're in. For example, mine is a rheumatology clinical nurse specialist. So they'll understand your medical case much better than your GP would. So they can then hopefully talk to your specialist and get you in, or tell you it's nothing to worry about. They're fantastic. Basically their entire job is just to kind of line things up so that the specialist can be super efficient with their time. Which brings us on to the specialist. Specialists, as I said, tend to be really busy. They have limited clinic hours, and you might find this quite brusque or blunt, because often you only have 10 or 15 minutes with your specialist for each meeting, and they just need to like bam, 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 get through everything that they need to talk to you about and check things off the list so that they can put you on your medication, put you on new medication, or like schedule you in for x-rays or tests or whatever they need to do. So like I said, this can come across as kind of brusque. It's not personal, it's just that they have a job to do and they tend to just like get it done. Specialists are not who you go to for moral support. I will just say that. Like they're there to deal with your illness, not you as a person. So that is your medical team, or at least my medical team. Hopefully it relates to your medical team as well, and what each person does. Even if your medical team is completely different from what I've just described here, I think it's really valuable to try to get to know what each person does and use their expertise to the best possible effect for you. Because like I said, no one's really going to explain this stuff to you, so it's worth trying to figure it out or like find out on your own if you can. Okay, so that's medical teams. Okay, like I mentioned, the next part is going to be a kind of problem and solution part, and as I also already mentioned, there are a lot of really big problems with the medical system that there's not much that we can do about, but there are some things that you can respond to or kind of do yourself to make things easier. So number one is only treating your physical illness. So often when you're diagnosed with a chronic illness, that comes with a lot of feelings and a lot of like long-term mental issues, just because having a long-term pain or like disability is really, really tough, and is tough mentally as well as physically. So often you won't be told about resources that are available to you as someone who is newly diagnosed with a chronic illness, whether that's support groups, whether that is a psychologist, or whatever you might want. Ask your specialist or your clinical nurse specialist about these things, because often they will be available to you, you just won't have been told about them. So definitely ask about that. The other thing is try to find groups of people who can support you, whether that is a group for people with disabilities, whether that is like your friends and family, whoever that is for you, try to like keep them around. And this is like an ongoing thing. Like I'll say this for almost every point. Just find that support network that really understands what's going on with you, not just physically, or maybe not even physically, but like mentally and emotionally, and keep them around and try and lean on them a little bit, because yeah, your medical team really will often not treat the mental and emotional side of things, unfortunately. Okay, next up we have being treated like a number. Unfortunately, this is with specialists especially. This is something that you will just have to learn to deal with. You'll be treated like you're a number and not a person. Often your specialist will just be treating your illness and your symptoms, not you as a human being, and that is just something to go in there expecting, I think. It's not going to change, so go in there expecting that and get your emotional needs met elsewhere, like I mentioned before. Okay, the next one is jumping through hoops. Now, this is something that I've found frustrates medical teams and medical people just as much as it frustrates people with disabilities. Often to get on better, aka more expensive medications, you will need to jump through several hoops, whether that's useless medications that never work for anyone, or whether that's having a certain number of like symptoms before you can get on these meds, so you just have to like wait and let your illness just get worse and worse, and then you can get on them. This happens. There's really nothing you can do about it except understand that no one likes this except like pharmaceutical companies and the government, who don't have to pay as much money for medication. Your specialist doesn't want this for you, your GP doesn't want this for you, you don't want this. No one wants this. It's just a really unfortunate part of how the medical system works at the moment, and something that unfortunately you should probably expect if you're treated with medication. Okay, sorry, I'm looking down. It's because I have a list on my phone. I really don't want to forget any of these, and there's quite a lot. Okay, number 4, 3, something. Next one is not getting the full story. Now, this is something that I really struggled with. So whether this is about your illness and the potential symptoms, or more commonly, I think, about medications and the potential side effects of them and the like potential efficacy. So I found that often your specialist will not tell you about the side effects of medications that you're getting put on, even if they're super common and happen to like 90% of people who are on this medication. Definitely for this, do your own research. There are tons of amazing forums where people who've actually been on medications will document their experience, and you can see like with percentages who got which side effects, and then you'll know what to expect. I'm not saying like don't take this medication because of it. I'm just saying educate yourself, make yourself aware, and then you will at least know what's coming, you know, because I know for me there have been times I've been put on medications that made me feel like I was actually going insane, and I thought I was genuinely going insane because I just didn't know it was a potential side effect. So yeah, that is a fun one. The next one is not being believed. Now, once again, this is a medical system issue that I cannot fix, and I really I put this in here because it's a problem. I really don't have a solution for it except keep going to ER when you have symptoms, keep going to your GP when you have symptoms, get them to document everything that's going on, like keep trying, keep going. It so often happens that it takes forever for people to get diagnoses. It so often happens that people won't be believed just on face value. It's really, really tragic that that's how things are, but unfortunately you just have to persist and keep getting things documented, keep like demanding attention. And I know it's like really difficult because you're exhausted, and it feels like a slap in the face every single time you go somewhere and say there's something wrong with me and someone's like, no, there's not. It feels terrible, but just keep going, try and push through it. I know it's really, really freaking frustrating and horrible to have to do that, but all I can tell you, unfortunately, is be persistent. Okay, the next one is, this is a really big one for me. Bad communication between medical branches. So you might find that your blood tests don't get sent to your specialist, or your x-ray results don't get sent to your GP, or you don't get copies of things that you've asked for copies for. This happens all the time. Like somehow medical branches just like fail to communicate with each other spectacularly. So what I will say is that calling to follow up to make sure that things get sent through often really works. Before you go to appointments, make sure that you like check, like for example, if you have a specialist appointment coming up and you only see your specialist every 6 months, check with the clinical nurse specialist that they have everything that they need, because if they don't and you go in there and it's another 6 months for your appointment, like, and they don't have your x-rays, for example, that's going to be a problem. So check with your clinical nurse specialist that they have the x-rays and everything they might need for the appointment. Keep copies of everything yourself. Like if you get sent your blood tests, keep copies of that. If you get sent your x-rays, which you probably won't, but if for whatever reason you do, keep those. Just keep everything, and then you can take things in if you need to. It really sucks because like the whole point is that you're supposed to communicate with each other. The whole point is that like this information is supposed to get to everyone that it needs to get to, and it just so often doesn't. So don't assume that things are going to get where they need to. Make sure that you follow up on things. Unfortunate, but once again, just necessary. Okay, this is another big one. Speaking too fast, like specialists speaking too fast, or having brain fog in meetings, or specialists just not explaining things. So this is something that I found when I was newly diagnosed would happen all the time. I would go into a specialist meeting and she would fast talk at me for like 5 minutes using words that I had no idea what they meant, and then just be like, okay, great, bye, and I'd be like, I wouldn't have got a chance to ask any questions that I had. I wouldn't have understood most of what was going on or retained any of it. A, because I didn't have any base knowledge of medicine or anything at that point. And B, just because I was in so much pain and like so lost that I just could not understand even basic English. So I have a couple of things for this. Number one is bring a notepad or take notes on your phone if you can. You can even ask if you can record if writing or typing is really difficult for you. Ask if you can record and bring like a little dictaphone and record what they say, and then you can listen back to it if you need to. do make sure that you ask first for this one. Number 2 is bring someone trusted to your specialist meetings with you. Obviously, make sure that it is someone, as I said, that you trust, someone who doesn't have brain fog, preferably, and get them to A, listen to what's being said so that they can tell you or like remind you later, and B, ask any questions or like advocate for you if you are having trouble advocating for yourself. Because the other part of this is often there's that like position of power and that imbalance between a specialist and you feel like you might not be able to ask questions or like challenge them or say, hey, this isn't working or whatever. When there's 2 of you versus 1 of the specialist, it feels a lot better. It feels a lot easier to do that kind of thing. The other thing is make time, just force time to ask your questions. Often specialists, like I said, they're really busy. They have like 10 or 15 minutes per appointment and they just like bam, bam, bam through it and then they try to get you out the door. Make sure that you say, oh no, I have some questions, because they will stop and listen to you, or at least that's my experience. Hopefully it's your experience as well. You just need to like make sure. Often, for whatever reason, they think they've answered all the questions. I think it's just like a specialist thing. They think that they've like given you all the answers, and if you still have questions, you need to make sure that you make time for those. Okay, so that is that. Next up is feeling intimidated or nervous around your doctors. I kind of touched on this in the previous one. However, it is a really big problem, and I think mainly what you need to realize is that they're there to treat you, and if that treatment is not working for you, then they need to know that and they're not doing their job. So essentially, you shouldn't feel intimidated by your doctor. I know it's so easy to say that and so hard to not feel intimidated, because often they're like super professional, super intimidating people. However, their job is to treat you, and you need to let them know if that is not being done. And the other thing is this one really just takes time, like time to get to know your specialist, time to get to know your GP. When you get more comfortable with these people, you will like feel better about challenging them and about like just being around them in general. You'll start to be able to actually have a conversation with them as opposed to just sitting there being like, Okay, so that's my advice on dealing with the medical system. I know, unfortunately, I didn't have solutions for like nearly all of these problems. I really wish that I did, but unfortunately, like I said at the start, all I can give you is how you can respond to issues that most of which shouldn't exist at all. So hopefully it's been somewhat helpful to you, even though I don't have all the answers. As I said at the start, if you have more experience or different experience from me, please leave your suggestions in the comments. I'm sure it will be really, really helpful to a ton of people and me. So like if you have anything that you have found works or any other issues that I didn't mention, let us all know, because honestly, I'm sure like everyone is still struggling with how to relate to our medical teams as disabled people. So yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you in the next one. Peace!